Okay, so real quick, I want to take you back about 7 years.
The star date was 2017. I'm a young, annoying kid fresh out of college with no clue what he wants to do with his life. All I know is that I have a passion for music and I want, scratch that, need to use it. Now, I love the electric guitar, but for a couple different reasons, I've decided the best way to do this isn't directly through guitar, but actually by going down the audio engineering rabbit hole.
Okay, so maybe not the smartest idea with me only having had like 8 months of experience at the time, but trust me, it gets better.
So I go online and randomly I find this 6-month audio engineering program, and the website looks absolutely bonkers. People holding mics, people at giant consoles, and people my age in actual studios in real time learning the craft. But what really got me, their big claim that they had a more than 60% job placement rate in the music industry.
Sounds a little bit too good to be true, right? But I didn't care. I was hooked, I was ready to do whatever it took, and I just had to be there. I mean, I was going to be the next great producer engineer. And within just a few months of weekly sessions, I became absolutely sure, I mean 100% certain that this place was an absolute scam. And I'm not talking small time. I was essentially given about 30 minutes of instruction each week from my mentor, if I can even call him that, where he would tell me to sit on the couch in the other end of the studio while he would give potential clients tours of that same studio and regale them with all these tales of how wonderful the program was. And wonderful it was not.
I was left with little to no information on producing or engineering, a meaningless certificate, and a career services guy who would only call me back once a month and ask me to remind him what I actually wanted to do again.
I was stuck. I had literally nothing to do, so I moved back in with my parents, searching literally every day, just dreaming that he would call me back telling me about some studio job in LA, but knowing full well that this was probably never going to happen.
So, down on my luck and unable to find a job, my mother suggests that we take a trip to Music City. I'm talking Nashville, Tennessee. So we get off the plane and we're doing all of the tourist stuff, walking around Broadway, trying some barbecue, doing anything just kind of getting my mind off the whole drastically unemployed situation. But we actually decide to make one more stop at the Musicians Hall of Fame Museum.
So we head over there and we start walking throughout this museum, and we're doing all this stuff, taking pictures, putting my hands on the console, writing fake Grammy speeches. Thank you. I'd like to take this time to thank absolutely nobody. So me and my mom end up parting ways, and I go to the jam room, and while in the jam room, I end up picking up one of their guitars. I start playing a few licks, and as soon as I look up from my guitar, I end up locking eyes with this girl. And in case you're wondering, this is not about to turn into a rom-com. That's for next week. So this girl happens to be at the piano, and she looks up at me and she goes, "Hey dude, I like your playing. Do you want to jam real quick?" And of course I go, "Heck yes." So then she asked me, "Do you know any Paramore?" And I was like, "Of course, that's one of my favorite bands." So she looks down and immediately starts playing the chords to their song, "Ain't It Fun?" Now I was sitting there with guitar in hand, and I knew I had heard the riff before, but I realized internally I had about 4 seconds to figure it out on the fretboard. So I'm thinking to myself, ears, please do not fail me now. So I start digging into the strings, and it was definitely rough for a second, but eventually I was able to recover and jam. But one thing I was not able to recover was the tone, because it was so off.
I needed a very specific tone, and quite frankly, I didn't want to ruin the jam.
I mean, this might be the moment that we talk about 5 years down the line where we started our multi-platinum winning band that eventually pushed me out of unemployment.
So I look down to change the tone and grab some more overdrive, and all I see is this single pedal board unit.
Now, at this point, I'm quite confused, and all I can think in my brain is I probably remember seeing one of these at one point at my old guitar storage job, but I never actually learned how to use one, and there are so many knobs. I was so overwhelmed. I immediately looked at the girl and I told her, "We gotta pause this ring real quick so that I can figure out this machine if this audition is ever gonna keep going." But unfortunately, it was just never gonna happen that day, because she eventually left and we never actually saw each other again. That essentially became in my mind the day that I decided that I had beef with the Boss ME80, and because I was such an arrogant young man, I thought that everyone else felt the same way. I mean, why would you ever want to use something like that when so many other digital modelers and multi-effects pedals exist?
And that sentiment would continue, and it would keep happening until a random day almost a year ago when I opened up my computer, logged in online, and instantly I saw it.
Boss had released the ME90, which essentially was a follow-up to the unit that prevented me from starting a band with the woman of my dreams.
Now, I'm angry and I'm ready to secretly upvote every comment trashing this thing, but the more I look, weirdly enough, the comments aren't actually trashing it. In fact, they're low-key praising it, non-stop talking about just how refreshing it is to see this, how they've been patiently waiting for this one, and how they've been fans going all the way back to the ME30.
Now, I don't necessarily mind being a contrarian necessary, and I think a lot of the times I actively thrive on that sort of energy. But I think at times in life when everyone is saying something and you're the absolute only one saying another thing, you might at times have to admit that you might be the problem. So I gave into peer pressure, I got it, I plugged it in, and within a day, and I'm not even joking, a single day, I had realized that I was completely wrong on this thing. And here's how it went down. You see, it all sort of started with me, well, getting this thing and opening it. And I immediately got flashbacks back to the museum because, let's be honest, at first glance, all these knobs, well, they can seem quite overwhelming. But then I remembered from my Katana days at Tone Studio, and that was sort of the turning point. Because a lot of what overwhelmed me about having so many knobs pretty much completely resolved itself once you lay it out in one simple chain. It's like it became a completely new piece of gear that was much easier to work with.
It was like all the intimidation left, and I sat there thinking, wow, I can't believe I finally understand this thing. But then I remembered, like, this little voice constantly scratching against my brain. People don't just like this because it's like all the other units, they like it because it's different. You have to learn to embrace the stomp box layout if you're ever going to really be able to appreciate this thing for what it actually is, and not just endlessly rely on the Tone Studio.
And that's when I went to work.
I studied the manual for days and weeks without rest, watched 700 YouTube tutorials back to back, learned every different stomp box combination.
Okay, I'm kidding. It didn't actually take that long. Much like with the simplifier that I got a couple months ago that initially really intimidated me because of all the knobs, it really only took me an hour to figure it out and to figure out how all of the different stomp boxes work together. And that's where the appreciation really sort of started to come to fruition, because as I've learned multiple times this year, it's not a big secret, but come here. People really love tweakability. It seems to be the big thing nowadays that separates something like this from other digital units that don't happen to have knobs. Once I remembered that and got to try it during a session, it once again all made sense. I want to get down to more than just the overdrive and really see what this thing can do. I kind of just want to try some sound, see what that inspires. You have to constantly remember that knobs are just a completely different feeling. I want to get an idea of what I'm even looking for this song. More or less like a 90s Oasis Britpop style thing. But I think any guitar player from the 90s just in general would probably be astounded at the technology we have today. So it's been a lot, but all of that sort of brings me here to today and finally figuring out what the point of all this is. Specifically, in reminding myself that it's more than okay to not like a piece of gear that everyone else seems to love. I mean, I've definitively had my share of amps, pedals, guitars over the years that I thought were super overrated and I thought would just never be for me, but I do find a lot of value, and I guess that's this channel as a whole, in questioning some of those opinions at times. And sometimes those experiences will only further cement why you hated that piece of gear in the first place, and sometimes it'll eventually help you to understand a piece of gear that you never thought you'd love because it was the reason that that girl never wanted to start a band with you back in 2018. But real talk, I have genuinely come to appreciate the ME90 and its more traditional approach to like this multi-effect style of pedal. I think pedals like this, especially more recently with the price range, have the task of giving people a lot for a little. And I think with the current price point of this being like $350 and Boss having the IR2 at only $200, that's really how they're making their claim to compete with a lot of the big hitters, where it's not necessarily just we can give you the touchscreen and we can give you all the latest digital ins and outs, but they're like, we're gonna give you everything and we're gonna give the people that like knobs their knobs. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what you think. So please let me know. Are you a fan of the ME90? Do you like the more recent stuff with the digital touchscreens? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I always think it's weird when I get a piece of gear that I've like dreamed about for so long, but I think it's even weirder when I get a piece of gear that I never thought I'd have simply because I thought it was so just outside the wheelbarrow of what I wanted. So when something like this changes my mind, it's a really cool moment. If you want to know anything about the ME90, I got it from the homies at Sweetwater. The links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, mics, guitars, amps, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to my patrons. There's some extra stuff on there, some extra content if you want to check it out. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, like most important of all, have a fantastic day.